Was it in the United States' interest to go to war against Iran? And is Washington repeating the same mistakes of the past? We ask the first US ambassador in post-war Iraq.
Iran continues to be a threat to other countries in the region, and we have been supportive of those friends that are having to cope with the efforts of Iran to subvert them. And we're supporting Israel. There's no doubt about it. We're supporting Israel.
You are indeed supporting Israel. Are you at war because of Israel?
No, I think we're at war because of Iran.
With Israel escalating its attacks on Lebanon, why aren't European countries like the United Kingdom taking any action?
Because it's bandwidth. I'm afraid number 10 is too busy dealing with domestic matters, international matters, Ukraine. Now you've got Iran on too many plates are spinning. That's, I'm afraid, the bottom line.
Are they too busy or are they too afraid?
Yeah, I think there's probably a combination of both.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rida Fakhri. The US-Israel war on Iran and Tehran's retaliation has brought death, destruction, and displacement across the Middle East. The stated aims of the war, according to President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, have changed numerous times. The war has already destabilized the entire region. It is a reminder of what happens when a war is launched without a legal mandate and without a plan for what comes next. The 2003 US-led war against Iraq brought years of insurgency and chaos to the Middle East. Is the United States repeating the same strategic mistake in Iran? John Negroponte served as the first US ambassador to Iraq following the invasion. He was previously permanent US representative to the United Nations, and he joins us now from Washington. Ambassador Negroponte, looking back to when the US launched its illegal war against Iraq based on quote-unquote an imminent danger, how confident are you that the US isn't at war today with Iran based on the same false pretense and external pressures?
Thank you for this interview, and thank you for your question. I don't want to relitigate the Iraq war. And yet, when you use the adjective you used, I feel I have to respond. There was a coalition of the willing. No, we did not get the second resolution. But why don't you ask the Iraqi government whether they think that war was illegal? There are a lot of 60% of the country was Shia. They'd been completely excluded from the political process. And I think our action was very welcome there. So, and Iraq today is somewhat of a success story in the sense that it's one of the countries in the Middle East that has had democratic elections successively for the past 20 years. I don't think you can point to an example of another country in the Middle East that has had democratic elections for the last 20 years. So that's that point.
Well, let me take you up on this point, Ambassador, if I can, because you say it's up to the Iraqi people to say whether the war was illegal or not. It isn't. International law was clear at the time. As you mentioned, there was no second Security Council resolution that sanctioned the war. But beyond that, moving on from that, Ambassador.
And we went to the UN.
Well, you also said that Iraq today is in a good place. According to the Global Conflict Report of 2026, over 1 million people in Iraq remain internally displaced, while 3 million people need humanitarian assistance as Iraq continues its reconstruction. So it is far from being a stable place. But just looking ahead toward what's going on now in the wider region and the United States war against Iran, Ambassador, you were the first Director of National Intelligence. You were tasked with coordinating intelligence to avoid another similar scenario. Given the false Iraq intelligence that was used to justify an illegal war on Iraq, why should the public trust what the US administration claims today about the quote-unquote imminent threat from Iran?
Well, I mean, look at their behavior. It's not only the nuclear file. As you know, Iran is a country that has systematically tried to undermine several, if not numerous, countries in the Middle East, in the Gulf region, using proxies to carry out its plans, whether it's the Hezbollah or the Houthis or whichever group they're resorting to at any particular time. This was an elaborate process of supporting groups that engage in violence against other countries in the Persian Gulf. And then it also had a stated policy stated in 3 words: death to Israel. So I think as a matter of fact, Iran has did succeed over these years since their revolution in stirring up the anxiety and the antipathy and the antagonism of many countries in the region, and it's doing it again. So, I just can't accept your premise. It's not going to be a very good interview if you and I end up just debating the premises of why we are involved
Why are you
why we're
involved,
responding to
Ambassador?
this situation.
Ambassador, not very many people in Washington seem to have a consistent argument for why the United States is involved today in another war, this time with Iran. Why is the United States involved?
Well, I mean, you've got to go back to the October War of a couple of years ago and some of the antecedents of this situation. And I think that Iran continues to have been, and continues to be a threat to other countries in the region. And we have been supportive of those friends that are having to cope with the efforts of Iran to subvert them. I think that's the basic reason. And we're supporting Israel. There's no doubt about it. We're supporting Israel.
You are indeed supporting Israel. Are you at war because of Israel?
No, I think we're at war because of Iran.
The US counterterrorism chief, Joe Kent, who is the first US official to have resigned over the war in Iran, said this, quote, "It is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." Is this yet another page from Israel's playbook? After all, Netanyahu himself said recently that he had yearned for 40 years to attack Iran.
Look, I'm afraid I'm just going to have to disengage from this interview because I don't think you're being objective in any way, shape, or form. I really regret it.
I'm giving you a fact, Ambassador. That was John Negroponte, the United States former ambassador to Iraq and former director of national intelligence. Some of President Trump's strongest criticisms since the first strikes on Iran have been reserved for British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The US president accused the United Kingdom of offering to help only when the war was, quote, already won. Tobias Ellwood is a former British Conservative minister. He chaired the UK Parliament's Defence Select Committee and was Under Secretary of State for the Middle East. He's also a former British soldier. Mr. Ellwood, several Western and European nations have ruled out sending warships to the Strait of Hormuz despite Trump's repeated pleas. Was that the right decision?
It's been the most testing period, not just for Britain, but for all Western allies as we take stock as what's happened here. We felt this was not a justified war. And the more we learn about it, we see that America may have been bumped into this by Netanyahu, saying they're going to attack. America may as well join in a preemptive strike because they might be part of the retaliation from Iran. Where was the threat from a wider perspective? There wasn't any. Now the line's been crossed. Now the bombs have started falling. It is uncomfortable how we got here, but having worked in the Middle East, visited the country many times, has there ever been a better opportunity for Iran to embark on a new chapter without a theocratic dictator in charge, without influencing proxy terrorist operations across the Middle East, without a regime that oppresses its own people? And that is the quagmire that we now face. Should we then support Donald Trump and his efforts in the Middle East? Should we then start to protect ships in the Straits of Hormuz? There are no simple answers here. Until we get clarity from the very top as to what Donald Trump actually wants to do, it's actually difficult to answer any of those other questions.
Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, says he has resisted so far US pressure to join the war in Iran. He said, while taking the necessary actions to defend ourselves and our allies. He says the UK won't be drawn into a wider war. But isn't the UK already involved in this war, just by the fact that they have already allowed their bases to be used by the United States?
Well, the bases are being used on an agreement that they're for defensive purposes only. So there is some small print there.
How can it be a defensive use if the bases are being used by the United States in its offensive war?
Well, there's a difference between attacking Iran, attacking assets, military bases and so forth in Iran, and then trying to take out the missiles. So the air defense, the protection of the rest of the Gulf. I think that's supposed to be the distinction. But you're right, it's all a bit blurred when it comes to it. The war has actually started. Britain has actually been attacked as well. But bigger picture, what does actually Britain stand for? What are our own values? Do we blindly follow America in whatever it does? We sort of tried that with Iraq and Afghanistan, and we paid heavily for that. There wasn't clarity as to what victory looked like. And so I think we have the ghosts of these previous interventions are loud, which is why we're saying, asking those questions, which is what a good ally should do, is where are you taking this? Where does this lead? How do you prevent escalation? What is the end game? What does victory look like?
Can the United Kingdom continue to face down the United States pressures?
Alone, no. And when you say United States, let's make it very, very clear. We're talking about a very unpredictable, volatile, and impulsive president, one that we've never seen the likes of before, moving away from a sense of duty to uphold the very rules-based order that he helped, that America helped to develop in the first place. So we are having to manage this situation. But the backdrop to this is also how he treats Europe, how he treats Britain. In the last number of weeks, we've seen him criticize Britain's involvement in Afghanistan, saying that we didn't participate in the operations. He's imposed tariffs on many countries, including Britain. And then, of course, he's tried to make a pop to annex Greenland. This goes all against the normal relationship that we have with the United States. What we saw with Greenland, which I think is a good indicator as to what our strategy should be, is that when we team up with other European countries and stand up to Donald Trump, then we gain traction.
But isn't that the problem? That Western nations, European powers only team up and decide to stand against violations of international law when it affects them directly. But when it comes to the Middle East, we have seen this before, the rush to join an illegal war. What does the UK stand to benefit?
It doesn't. There is no, from where I sit right now, I see an outcome not too dissimilar to Venezuela, worse than Venezuela, in the sense you have regime stays, but the leadership changes, but they will continue pursuing a nuclear weapon, they will continue building long-range missiles, and they will continue oppressing their own people, as well as leveraging proxy influence across the Middle East. That cannot be the outcome that even Donald Trump wants. It certainly isn't the one that Britain wants, and that's why we've been hesitant to participate at all. But the bigger question, though, as I say, is after 40, 50 years of oppression under a theocratic regime, will we ever, in our generation, get a better opportunity to try and advance a fresh start for Iran.
But is it for anyone outside of Iran to decide their future? Is it for the United States, for the UK, or for any other country to decide that the regime in Iran needs to be changed, or to decide that the leadership in Iran needs to be removed?
In principle, I think the way your question implies, it should be for the Iranian people. But the Iranian people don't get a say because there aren't free and fair elections.
But you could say the same about many other countries.
You could, but we're talking about Iran right now, and therefore there needs to be a wise strategy that takes us into a better place.
President Trump has been openly pressing the United States allies to contribute to America's military operations. Should the UK or any other Western nation align themselves with that plan, or should they continue to maintain as much independence as possible given the risks of serious escalation?
So when a country joins in with another country in war, you should have a say in what happens and what the objectives are, and then how you go about prosecuting your plan. At the moment, none of that is on the table. None of that has been offered to Britain or indeed any other countries to say, if you join in, you get a seat at the table to say how things will develop, what we should do, what the strategy might be. Now, for those dangers, for the fact that we don't believe that Trump has a plan, that's why there's huge hesitancy, not just in Britain, but right across the piece to say, we're not going to get involved in this because you're not even in control of where this goes. This is escalating.
Does it bother you that the United States and Israel have launched a war of aggression?
100%. I mean, look at the consequences.
So is there any scenario in which the UK would justify its participation?
At the current moment, absolutely not. And even if you were to do a deal with Donald Trump to say, we're going to join with you, we're going to realize that we have to take on Iran and remove those missiles and protect the Straits of Hormuz, we don't have any guarantees that Israel will then play ball. What will Netanyahu do? We have absolutely no idea. And I think we both know that it's in his interest to keep the war going because he's under domestic pressure himself. And I don't even believe Donald Trump can control what Netanyahu is up to.
Do you believe those who say that Donald Trump and Netanyahu actually launched this war because they did not want negotiations and a peaceful resolution with Iran?
I think it's deeper than that. I think Netanyahu has long wanted to do this, long wanted to pummel Iran and see this regime fall, kill any leader that they can. And we've seen them do that with venom over the last few days. With Donald Trump, I actually think he almost got punch drunk. He was almost on another plane after the success of Venezuela, probably believed that he could do the same. And clearly that hasn't happened because Iran has been preparing this for decades. Their system is designed to be hit from all sides and to survive. There was no justification from a nuclear perspective, as if a bomb was about to be procured and therefore that justified any form of attack. That's very, very clear. So we should park that. The IAEA were having their inspectors there. Agreements were actually taking place. We confirmed that. Jonathan Powell, our national security advisor, was saying that talks were advanced before America and Israel then hit. So America is playing this as justification, and certainly Israel is as well. And it's another reason why I think Britain was hesitant to then join in.
Should NATO, a defensive organization, get involved?
So this is another demonstration as to the poor grasp that Donald Trump has on the entire geopolitical play here, because NATO is not allowed to. Its Article 5 is not allowed to be triggered in locations outside of Europe itself. So it has to be one of the European or indeed NATO member countries being directly attacked in the same way that NATO wasn't called in to help in Vietnam, and certainly wasn't called in when we had problems in the Falkland Islands. That's why it can't be called up now. So his advisors should have explained to him there can be no NATO coalition operation there. There could be a coalition of the willing of NATO countries. That's another matter. But again, why would you put your military in harm's way if you didn't have clarity as to where the war was heading? If the war calmed down, if there was some form of agreement, if talks then began, that's a different matter. You can then say, we're now going to go in and patrol and we're going to get rid of the mines. We're going to keep the straits open for the benefit of the international community. Until that happens, though, you can then see where this could escalate.
And we've already seen the spillover in the Gulf, but also in Lebanon, with Israel now implementing part of its Greater Israel plan. It's invaded the south of Lebanon. Many people in the country fear prolonged occupation, ethnic cleansing, with 1 million people being displaced from their homes. That's 1/5 of the Lebanese population. Where does Europe draw the line? When does it sanction Israel for this lawless behavior and stop providing it with military and diplomatic cover?
I don't know what military cover it is being offered anymore. The wider picture that you describe here is an illustration of just how there's an absence of sense of purpose or understanding as to what the international rules-based order is. Because Donald Trump doesn't care about UN institutions such as this, countries like Israel can pursue their own agendas unchecked. And that takes us into a very dangerous place. And it isn't just Israel, it's other countries around the world as well. So what you're seeing play out in Lebanon with Hezbollah is to pursue aggressive kinetic action, knowing that Israel can't be held to account anywhere because everybody either is too distracted or B, because Donald Trump doesn't really care.
Or too afraid to act, because you do have powers, don't you? Every Western nation does. We've seen how the invasion of Ukraine meant immediate sanctions against Russia, which I presume you agree with. Why should it be any different when Israel invades another country?
Because those sanctions came with American support. So there was a wider international community of support. I wouldn't rule out the fact that if Israel does continue in this way in Lebanon, almost taking advantage of the distraction of what's going on in Iran, then the international community will respond. But you're right to point out...
But why shouldn't the international community, quote unquote, respond now?
Because its bandwidth, I'm afraid, number 10, is too busy dealing with domestic matters, international matters, Ukraine. Now you've got Iran on too many plates are spinning. That's, I'm afraid, the bottom line.
Are they too busy, or are they too afraid to act without America's
Yeah, I think there's probably
acceptance?
a combination of both. I think it's worrying and it's sad that Israel has allowed Netanyahu, I stress, not say Israel, because a different leadership might pursue things in a different way. But what we see in the West Bank is equally appalling. The illegal settlements that are then growing. Israel as a whole is taking full advantage, Gaza as well. Back to your main point though, you're right. The international community is too distracted, probably too intimidated, too timid to be able to then stand up. And
too subservient?
Therefore, I think we are learning, this is the trouble, is that never before, I'm a dual national, I was born in America, and it saddens me that America and Europe are not on the same page. And we're now having to adjust as America disengages from Europe and does its own thing. So going back to what Israel is doing in Lebanon, there is a much learning to be done. The sadness about Israel's strategy, I should say, is that when was Hezbollah formed? It was 82 or something? And it was prompted by the invasion of Israel to the Litani River in southern Lebanon. And you formed an ideology which is there today.
An invasion of Beirut as well.
Yeah, and you don't, this is the point, you don't defeat that ideology. You don't change the mindset by continually invading. That is never going to work. So more mayhem in poor Lebanon with the civilians affected right across the piece. Does it actually achieve any long-term peace? No, it doesn't. This is, I'm afraid, the conveyor belt that Israel continues to play.
We've heard UK and other officials, we've even heard Keir Starmer say that we have learned the lessons of Iraq. Do you buy that? Would we have seen a strike against Iran if the world had learned the lessons of Iraq?
I think that question sums up the difference between Donald Trump thinking now and the European thinking, because we are so scarred, not just by what happened in Iraq, but what happened also in Afghanistan. The idea that you can roll in superior military might and have a good outcome, that you can prompt regime change simply by bombing from up on high. It doesn't happen. There needs to be a deeper plan, and that is absent. And until there's clarity, you're going to get division between the United States and Europe.
Tobias Ellwood, Thanks very much.
Thank you.
What we are witnessing today feels all too familiar. The echoes of Iraq are unmissable. Contested intelligence, a rush to war, and a region once again pulled into a wider conflict with no clear endgame. The lessons that were meant to guide restraint and accountability appear to have faded. And the world is now left to deal with the consequences of a war launched without a viable plan or a clear understanding of its cost. That's all from me, Rida Fakhri, and the team. Thanks for watching.